All right, everybody, welcome back to the #1 television program in the history of the entire universe. I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon, The Blackest Heart, and The Lonesome Crown. All three books published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Today I'm going to be reviewing Runestone by Don Coldsmith. And man, did I enjoy this book. It's a historical novel that is probably going to be one of my favorite historical novels I've ever read. It's just super cool, guys. Runestone, Don Coldsmith, came out in 1995. Man, I just heard about it not long ago. I mean, I started buying all of Don Coldsmith's Spanish Bit series of novels, which I've read and reviewed a few of them on the channel. Now, the Spanish Bit was about, that series was about Native Americans and how the Spanish explorers sort of destroyed their culture as the Spanish explorers kind of came up through the Southwest and everything. Well, this book is about the Viking explorers coming from the East into the West. Now, the reason Don Coldsmith wrote this book was he heard about some Viking runes. You know, the Runestone is actually called the Runestone, and it's in Oklahoma somewhere, and it's a Viking writing that is found on this runestone that dates back to about the year 1090, which is a long time ago. And Don Coldsmith was like, how did Vikings get all the way to the middle of America in the year 1090? It just seems insane. And so he wrote this book as sort of an answer to how that might have happened. So, starts out from the perspective of some Native Americans who were living around this runestone at the time, probably shortly after the runestone itself was created. So we get this scene where there's Elk Woman, she is the mom, Deer Mouse, he is the kid, Spirit Walker, he is the old decrepit man, and Tracker, who is their guide. Now their village has just been destroyed, and so they're being chased through the wilderness by the shaved heads. That's the bad guys, the shaved heads. So they are fleeing. Their village has been destroyed. They are fleeing through the wilderness, being chased by the shaved heads who have just destroyed their village. And so these four people are fleeing, and they come across this runestone. And they're like, what is this? What does it mean? And then cut scene. Then we go back in time a little bit to when our Vikings. We join our Vikings. So Nils Thor's son, which is there's never a more Viking name than Thor son. Nils, N-I-L-S, Thor's son. Nils Thor's son. He's a descendant of Leif Erikson. And he wants to follow his grandfather's path from Norway to Vinland. Now, Vinland is basically the Americas. So he wants to follow the path of his grandfather, Leif Erikson. And so he's got there's this crew of about 2 Viking ships, and they're going up the St. Lawrence River. As they're traveling up the river, by the way, there's a map here. There's a map. I always mention the map. There's a map of the route they took. Not only that, let's talk about the cover. I forgot about that. The cover is done. I love graphic design and cover art. We always talk about that at the beginning of every book review, and I neglected it. This has got a great little illustration up here by Tom Hall. Now, Tom Hall also did all of these great illustrations for the Spanish Bit Saga, and all of these illustrations are just super good. Anyway, so let's give a shout out to Tom Hall. Sorry I that up. I usually do that in the beginning. But anyway, let's talk about Nils Thorson and the 2 Viking ships that he's taking up the St. Lawrence River. Now, as he's taking this crew, I don't know how many men you can fit on Viking ships, but it's not many. And they're going up this the St. Lawrence River further and further into the United States. And as they're doing this, the natives that live there, they're watching from the shoreline, and they're getting very concerned. And once in a while, they will launch an attack upon these Vikings. But the Vikings kill them pretty easily because they've got better weapons, better armor, things like that. And so the Vikings just at this point consider them like a nuisance as they journey. And they get kind of cocky, and they get kind of stubborn. and they start to make some mistakes. And Nils Thorson realizes some of the mistakes he's making, because he's starting to realize that slowly they're being whittled down in numbers, and eventually they just outnumbered. Eventually, they're just outnumbered by the natives, and they're kind of slayed. And then I'm not giving up any sort of spoilers here. All this stuff takes place pretty much at the beginning of the book, where we just kind of are into this journey, and we learn how fragile life is, both life and limb, and relationships. There's women on this journey. We learn how the relationships are fragile. Life and limb is fragile. These Viking boats themselves are fragile, and how nature can just sort of win the day just by being Mother Nature. And not only that, but how grim it is for both the Vikings and the Native Americans at the time. How life was just bleak and stark and dangerous and brutal, and you never knew what might happen. The grim and brutal existence of both of these peoples was just something that none of you want to be a part of. However, despite all that, the will and determination of both the Vikings and the Native Americans the Vikings to discover and settle new lands, the Native Americans to hold on to the lands that they have, and to repel these invaders. Just the will and determination, despite how bleak and awful life would be. Like, why would you even want to live anywhere? But yet they held on to life with this determination, and they appreciated life with a determination, and sort of that we don't see today. Like, people give up so easily now. And when you read books like this about what it was really like back when men were men, and they had to just, and not only that, but the women were as strong as the men in their will and determination to survive. And to survive for what? It's like there's not like any sort of grand golden palace at the end of it. There's nothing at the end. Today we work towards getting a home and a car and all of these luxuries. Back then they could work and work and work and work, and there was no luxury on the horizon. They just did it for themselves and for their loved ones. That's it. That's all they had. And it's almost like they were more willing to go the extra mile and to do the extra thing back in those days than we give up so easily now. We just give up. And then you read a book like this and you understand how just noble and brave and adventurous our ancestors were compared to how we are. It's just crazy. Anyway, this troop of Vikings, these Viking ships, it gets to the point where there's only 4 of them left. And now at this point, they've got to decide, do we assimilate ourselves into this society? Because there's no way we can go back. So do we continue to fight and be hunted, or do we assimilate ourselves in? Do we become captors? Do we try to escape into the wilderness? Well, because that would suck, because we're just going to run into more awful things. Or what do we do? And that's the conundrum that these and this is how they get to the middle of America, to leave this Runestone in the middle of Oklahoma, or so according to Don Coldsmith. This is his best guess of how it happened. And it's riveting stuff. It's riveting adventure, stark adventure. Absolutely blown away by this book. This is a solid 10 out of 10 historical novel that everybody that loves historical novels about Vikings or Native Americans or anything like that, medieval history, Western history, the history of our Old West, they just got to read this. It's absolutely 100% one of the surprises of the year for me is Runestone by Don Coldsmith. 10 out of 10.